Hey there, and welcome to our story, Maxwell and Dad, a place where it's more than just a podcast. It's a conversation. It's educational. It's uplifting. It's an opportunity to share our story, the story of Maxwell and myself, affectionately known as Maxwell Dad, where we share our journey, our experiences. We share updates about Maxwell, and we also share the stories of others. We talk about fatherhood. We talk about parenting a child who is differently able. We talk about being a single parent. We talk about a whole host of things. We talk about co-parenting. Again, this is our story. Today, we have a special episode, and I'm pleased to introduce to us and welcome my good friend, my colleague, my sister, Dr. Takesha Harris, with us on the podcast on today.
Hi, everybody. I was like, we can just go by Keisha. We can be informal.
All right. All right. Well, Dr. Harris, I'm going to turn it over to you, or we can flow. Well, I'll say this. And so, a few months ago, Dr. Harris and a few of our colleagues and some of her really good friends from my doctoral program, we did. They interviewed me about my experiences being Maxwell's father, Maxwell's dad, and guess had some technical difficulties, but nonetheless, this is an opportunity to. I said, well, hey, I would love to share my story, and this is episode 2. And I said, I would love for you to interview me and ask similar questions. If you have some different questions, by all means. But I wanted to just have the conversation, give people a deeper look as it relates to our story as Maxwell and Dad, and so. I thank you for consenting. I thank you for agreeing to be a part of this conversation. And thank you.
Well, I'm glad that we get to have this conversation and to do it again and for your audience. And so I look forward to it. So we're going to just jump on in here. And the first question I have for you kind of goes with what you just said when you talked about being differently able. So there are different ways that people refer to children that have special needs. Do you have a preference? Do you think it matters? Would you prefer special needs, differently abled? And I'm also going to ask you about explaining what neurodivergent is in terms of the way that people define children who are differently able as well. What is your preference? And then can you define neurodivergent?
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I used the two terms interchangeably. I used differently able when I'm being more intentional in my conversation, and whether it be from the pulpit or and if I'm writing something on social media, I use the term differently able. Sometimes just default special needs is kind of, I think, the more colloquial, familiar term that most people know. But I use both terms. It really depends on the setting I'm in, or the mood I'm in, or just kind of what I'm thinking. And so, yeah, I use both terms, differently able or special needs. I think again, special needs is more of the term that's more commonly known, and I'm not offended by either uses of the term. Me personally, I remember seeing a post a few years ago where persons were debating the term differently able, or special needs, or disabled, and somebody who actually in that community who had a disability, they took offense to, I forget which term it was, and so I understand that my entrance into the community is different via my son, but I totally will be sensitive to somebody who may be living with CP, or maybe living with something, a disability, for lack of terms. And so however they prefer to be referred to, I yield to them. So as it relates to neurodivergent, um, I, I don't hear that term, me personally, a lot. Um, so I guess just thinking about the term, I would think, just kind of in my own mind, the context clues, I would think that whatever is neurologically, I don't say the standard, but I guess I would. I'm not sure. And so the term I use sometimes is neurotypical, which is, somebody, what you will see typically in a neurologically in a child. Again, Maxwell has CP, which, has a lot to do with, neurology. And so Maxwell is not a quote unquote neurotypical child. We think neurotypical is, we think a child with quote unquote, no issues, quote unquote normal child. So I guess Maxwell will be a neurodivergent because he's not the neurotypical child. I might be explaining it right, but that's how I think about when I use the word, neuro, and something that comes after it. And so, yeah, I'm sure somebody in the comments might have something to say or might be a little more educated on this. And I could do a quick Google search, but I don't want to be looking on my phone, so I just kind of going off the top of my head. So, yeah. So the term I do use at times as well is neurotypical.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And sort of a follow-up question. So how do you do the whole handy-capable, because I know that also can be a hot topic as well, hot button topic as well.
Yeah, see, I never heard that one. I've never heard handy capable. Definitely have heard handicap, but I've never heard handy capable. And that term I really don't use a lot, unless it's and not be funny, unless it's like handicap ramp or something, or a handicap accessible vehicle. But I use handicap as it relates to accessibility. Getting into a building, getting into a vehicle or something of that nature. But typically, that's the only time I really use that word that I can think of off the top of my head. And language is very important. One of the things that I never, at least now you don't hear me using like slow or retarded or anything like that. I cringe when I hear people say, "Oh, he's slow or she's slow," or "That's just retarded," right? I cringe. I think that's language that's insensitive, but I get it. I don't give people a hard time, because I know it's just, again, common vernacular, and people use it not meaning ill will. But I do take moments, especially from the pulpit or from writing or something, or even like in a space like this, to try to educate on just one, that term is, that we don't use that term as well, and it kind of has a negative connotation. And so, but yeah, I have not heard the term handy capable. That's new. I might kind of enter that into my lexicon.
Yes. So how has it been for you as a father caretaking for Maxwell over the years?
It's been a journey. It's been a journey. Maxwell was born at 32 weeks, 5 days gestation. He was premature, and he was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so those first, he's born in August, and so to maybe January, February, what's that? Maybe those first 5 months, he was going to date. Well, his first 29 days, he was in the hospital in the NICU, and then the next 4 months, he was going to a daycare, somewhere around there. That was almost 10 years ago, but I think his mother stayed home with him for like a month. And then he went to daycare at church across the street from us, where we were living in Charlotte. And Maxwell, he started to aspirate. They diagnosed him as failure to thrive. I mean, he wasn't gaining any weight. They wasn't sure from nutrition. He was getting all the nutrition that he needed, and kind of found out after we did a swallow study, he was aspirating, meaning when he would drink the milk from the bottle or from the breast, if I remember correctly. Again, instead of the milk going down, as we always say, went down the wrong pipe, going down the correct pipe, it was going, and I'm drawing a blank, but I guess that's maybe the trachea, I believe. And so he's aspirating, so he couldn't breathe, and you can suffocate, and pneumonia, so on and so forth. And let me just, I'm not a doctor, although I play one sometimes, with Maxwell, but I'm not a doctor. And so, again, if I'm using correct terms or the scientific, don't quote me, or do your own research. But nonetheless, so we did a swallow study, found out he was aspirating, and so we had to get a G-tube placed, so he can get the nutrition that he needed. And when we got the G-tube placed, the daycare we were sending him to was like, hey, we can no longer care for him. That's too much of a liability, and we don't care for G-tube kids. And so we had to withdraw him out of daycare. And so at the time, I had two jobs. I was pastoring a church, and I was working in the school system. His mother had one job, and so I decided to leave the job that I was working in the school system and just work the church and care for him during the week. And again, Maxwell was young, and so all of the things that he had going on, we just didn't know yet. We didn't know, any kind of neurological things that he had going on. We just knew the G-tube. And Maxwell now is followed by a whole host of specialists. And so for that month, that first month and a half, I was caring for Maxwell, and it was just, I was miserable. Like, it was hard. I mean, when I say it was hard, it was hard. And so he, if I was not holding him physically, he would cry. I put him down and to go, to the kitchen and he would start crying. And so as a caregiver, that first month and a half, it was just so overwhelming. I mean, it was just so overwhelming. It literally, I was being driven crazy because I just didn't know what to do. And I think as a man, right, just kind of, and I'll just be honest, I think culturally we're used to the mothers being a caregiver, being a caretaker. And so it was thrust upon me, and I just was not ready emotionally and just mentally and spiritually to care for him in that moment the way he needed to be cared for. And so had a conversation with his mother, like, hey, we need help. Like, I can't do this. So we ended up moving. Her godmother, she owns a daycare. And so, in communication with her family and her godmother, she was like, hey, you all move back we were living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, if you move back to the Hampton Roads area, and you bring him to me, just teach me how to care for him, and I got you all. And so that's what we did. We moved. His mother was able to get a job, and we moved back to 757, which affectionately called, and we took him to her godmother's daycare, and she took care of him, and that allowed me to kind of get a breather. That allowed us to kind of have a village around us. But as well as have some support, right? It wasn't just because my grandmother was living there, but she was older, and it was a lot. And so being back in Virginia was very helpful. And again, I can take him to daycare, and I can kind of have a break. It wasn't just me caring for him, 24/7. And I don't want to say I was caring for him 24/7. When Charlotte, when his mother got home, of course she helped as well. But it wasn't me caring for him, most of the day, the working day. But then during that time back in Virginia, able to connect him with different specialists, so neurologists and ENT, ear, nose, and throat, and pulmonologists and GI doctors. So we're able to kind of get him the care that he needed. And so taking him to all those appointments really gave me confidence, and learning what Maxwell needed, learning how to care for him, building that kind of father-son relationship. And that was, we moved back in 2015. So from 2015 to about 2020, before we moved up here, I was Maxwell's, in terms of, I took him to most of his appointments, and while his mother worked, and I was pastoring, and so I would, be full-time at one point, then I'd go, get a job. So it's kind of full-time on and off, but I had the flexibility to really transport Maxwell to his appointments, to really understand what he needed. What really, really helped give me the confidence as a caretaker and the care for Maxwell was, again, during that first year in 2015, him being back, I think he got some kind of respiratory illness, and he was struggling. He was struggling because Maxwell has what's called tracheomalacia. He has a floppy trachea. And what happens is, like, when we get sick, we can just kind of cough up our phlegm, cough up our secretions, and it doesn't get stuck. But Maxwell at that time, even still now, he can't clear his secretions as easy as us, because it doesn't have the neuromotor skills to do so, especially at that young age. And so his ENT was like, hey, I think Maxwell needs a trach. A trach is a very invasive procedure, a very invasive surgery. And then his pulmonologist was like, "Hey, I think Maxwell wants a trach." And I'm like, I'm not really sure. His mother and I consulted, and one of my best friends growing up, and still a really good friend, Dr. Khalid Graham, I called him. I was like, "Hey, the doctors are saying, this is what Maxwell needs. What should we do?" He said, "We'll get a second opinion." All right. And so the ENT referred us to another ENT for a second opinion. And that ENT was like, "Hey, if you can keep Maxwell healthy for 2 winters, he should be strong enough where he wouldn't need a trach." And so we pulled him out of daycare again, probably starting like August or September of 2015. And from that time until maybe about from August or September 2015 to about late January, February of 2016, I stayed home with Maxwell. Now at that time, we were living with his grandparents. We were living in their home, and so I had some help. Had a village, but I was home with him and caring for him, trying to keep him healthy and giving his medications. Then we eventually I got private duty nursing in Virginia, and so we were able to have a nurse there with him. But during that time, we were having more support. I just gained the confidence to care for Maxwell. So if I knew what I knew now and had the experience and the confidence now, we would have never had to leave Charlotte. But again, it's our experience, and you only know what you know during those times. And at the time, I just didn't have the tools to care for Maxwell like I did. And so now being him living with me now, being his caretaker. Again, I do have help. I have private duty nursing, but I just feel that much more confident in caring for him and I knowing what he needs and just being his father and his caretaker. So I just have the confidence in doing it from those experiences over those years and going to doctor's appointments and learning. And I remember when we were first moving up here to Baltimore, we had to take him to ER for something. I think he had a GJ2 at the time. I think it got dislodged, and we took him to John Hopkins, and that was the first time we took him to Hopkins. So they had like no kind of medical records on him. And we were in ER. We were talking to the doctors and talking to the nurses. I remember one of the attending physicians. She asked me like, "Are you a nurse or something?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just his father. Like I just know stuff, right?" Because I just learned over time, and in a lot of ways it gives me pride. Like I know stuff, and I think just even as I kind of introduced the purpose of this podcast, right, to center fatherhood and fathers who are actually doing the work and showing up for their children. A lot of times in hospitals, in these spaces, they automatically by default turn to the mother, right? They ask the mother questions, and it's like, yo, hey, like, I'm here, like I know this stuff, right? And not to say his mother's, he has a great mother, and very involved in his life, but it was just because of just the rhythm of our lives and her working schedule, my work schedule, it just allowed me to be there more as appointments. So I will relay information back to her. And so it was like, hey, like, you don't got to look at her. Like, I know what I'm talking about. And so for any healthcare professionals, don't just automatically think that it's always, the mothers who know everything, the fathers don't know anything. But that's what kind of gave me the experience and the confidence to be a caregiver. And I'm sure once people watch this podcast and watch these episodes enough, they'll probably see that I can give a long answer to a short question. So I hope that answers your question. But yes.
It does. It also makes me want to point out for anybody who's new at this that, your confidence grew over the years. And so if they feel, right now overwhelmed and feel like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Give yourself some grace and some time to learn the process. So you've talked about your support system. You've talked about your current support system, previous support system. And there's always this idea, who cares for the caretaker, right? Mm-hmm. Does your support system check in on you and your needs as you're caretaking for Maxwell?
My support system. Yeah, I would say so. I would say it's getting better. Again, Maxwell has been living with me full time since the last weekend of July 2023, and so Um, yeah, I would say, some friends, that I've empowered, to check in, they would check in. I have therapy. Um, um, yeah, and so, but what I've learned really is that I've had to, tell people I need help. I have to tell people, I've had to ask like, hey, I want to travel. Can you come be with Maxwell? Because as a pastor, sometimes people don't want to bother the pastor. They want to kind of leave the pastor. Well, maybe it's private. He may not want us in his business, or may not need help, or it may be good. And so I've had to really just vocalize like, hey, I need help, or hey, can you spend some time with Maxwell? And I still need to do better at that. um I'm grateful for my mother, who shows up a lot when I need her. Yeah, so again, my mother, good is friends, who are supportive. When I call on them, um, church members. But I'll be honest, I need to do a better job of asking for help. I need to do a better job of asking people, who I trust, to come and help, and or give me a break. I'm kind of one of those people where I don't always ask for help. And then it's, again, Maxwell, um he's not like the neurotypical child, to use that language again. And so I understand it's different. So it's explaining, I just can't say, hey, here's, can you be with Maxwell, and I have some pizza in the fridge for him, or something like that. It's, how do you, if you need to change it, what do you do? uh if something happens with his G2, what do you do? If he starts choking, how do you suction him? And if you need to give him medication or something, so it's a lot of things that need to teach people to do. And sometimes folks get overwhelmed. And so, but again, I am grateful for the help that I have, and I'm grateful for the nurses that I have. I have overnight nursing, and I have daytime nursing. And so I'm grateful for that as well. So yeah.
So, speaking of your help and the idea of Maxwell not being neurotypical, how do you feel like your family has handled Maxwell not being neurotypical? Is there a difference that you've noticed? We're not naming names, but just, kind of being honest. Have you noticed the difference?
Yeah. So what I would say is that my family, they're on the go. Like, my family be outside, like, and that was kind of the rationale when his mother and I, when we were still married, when we were contemplating, where to move. I was like, yeah, she wanted to move to the DMV, and I was like, my family be like, they're on the go, so I don't know if we will get the help that we want right now. And so, her family, they live active lives as well, but she had, their rhythm, was a little more suitable, I think, to helping us. And so even now, uh, and you came to the birthday party. I think that was in 2022. I think, yeah, when Maxwell turned, I guess that was his eighth birthday party. I invited my cousins and their kids, and they all came. Right, they all came. They all showed up, and so they come. They show up. When they ask parties and stuff like that. Um, but I think, again, it's just being more intentional about educating them and inviting them to things. But they live very busy lives. They're millennials, and so I think they show up when they can. I think they always ask about how Maxwell is doing. It's always being very prayerful. If I need prayer for him. Um, and so I don't think my family shows up any more or less for Maxwell than we do the other kids in our family. Like, my brother, I have nephews who are very busy, very active in sports and things like that. And it's not like, all the family is at that game, and or at another cousin's kids games, and they don't come to Maxwell stuff. It's just everybody kind of just in their own little silos. But when we do come together for gatherings, they will come, they will support if they're schedule allows. And I'll be honest, that's one thing I want to do a better job of is, showing up for because they've come to Maxwell stuff, but showing up for their kids stuff. And at times it's just difficult because it's a task to get Maxwell out the door, right? And a lot of times on some Saturdays I don't have help, especially before Maxwell came to live with me. When he would come on weekends to be with me, it was just him and I, and I got to get myself ready, and it takes no less than an hour and a half to get Maxwell ready. And it's been times when I got Maxwell bathed, gave him his medicine, got him dressed and ready to go, and Maxwell peed, or he did number 2, and I was like, oh, like Maxwell, like now we got to get you undressed again. Just after doing all that, it's like, I'm just tired. But it's just more. It takes more intentionality and starting early to get him out the door, and again, a lot of times, as it relates to parties or events or whatever the case may be, a lot of things aren't planned with people who are differently able in mind. A lot of these events are definitely, very, ableist centered. And again, right, there's no, no ill will, no love lost, but that's just the reality. But to answer your question, yeah, I do have, my family is supportive. But again, I think I need to do a better job of being intentional. But I would invite them. I would invite them to also, take the initiative and, hey, I want to, we want to come hang out with Maxwell, or we want to, come see Maxwell, or, whatever the case may be. So I think it can work both ways. And then I think sometimes it's just, it's just, I think sometimes the unknown can be kind of scary to people, right? Because it's just like, they don't want to do anything wrong. If it's caring for Maxwell. And so, I don't know. I guess I still processing and kind of, working through those thoughts and how best, to go about, those things. But I'm definitely happy to be back in, the DC, Baltimore area. Now, just, as an aside, this isn't a regional podcast, but DMV and Baltimore is 2 different regions. So we'll put that out there. But, kind of could lump them together. I'm definitely happy to be back, in closer proximity to my family, because it's just more accessible to get, with my cousins and my family and their children and stuff like that. And so yeah.
So you and Bax have taught me a lot about what it means to journey beside someone who, is caring for a child that's differently abled. And so one of the things that really kind of opened up my eyes and made me just reconsider, we take birthday parties for granted. And like you said, you threw Maxwell a birthday party for his 8th birthday. And, it's so common for people to have birthdays for their children. But I was like, oh wow, we're like, you thought to do a birthday party for Maxwell. And so I really appreciate it because it opened my eyes to consider something that's different. So for parents who are watching the podcast and may have a child that's differently abled, and they, don't think because their child is not neurotypical, they're not thinking they can do things that neurotypical children, would have. And so I wanted to know what made you even think to say, hey, let me create a celebration for Maxwell, because this is what any parent would do for their child. And so how would you help them process through that? And what are some things to consider?
So a couple of things. And so if people haven't figured out now, Maxwell's mother and I, we're divorced, we're not together anymore. And so when we were married, we did a lot of things together. Maxwell had parties. And then when we separated and got divorced, some of those things got a little different, right? Who whose weekend is Maxwell's birthday fall, and just kind of work all those kind of, co-parenting things out, right? And again, this will also be a co-parenting podcast as well. And so I knew on his 8th birthday, so since Maxwell was born, I knew that I wanted to get him baptized when he turned 8, right? New beginning. So it was like, we're gonna do a birthday party, do baptism. Like 8's gonna be a big year. Last year for his 9th birthday, took him to New York City for the first time because Maxwell loved lights. So we took him to New York City. And you probably can hear Maxwell in the background right now turning up. But and so I remember a neurologist in Virginia, Dr. Tor, Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters, an older neurologist. His thing was like, hey, I know you want to, be protective of your child. I know you want to try to keep him healthy. You want to do your best to shield him and just, really just protect him. But he said, you got to let him live. Like, just let him live life. Let him experience life. So that's one thing I think about this, as much as I can, I just have to let Maxwell, as much as I can, give him a good quality life and let him just experience life. Although he may be different, he's not deficient. Number two, at the time I was dating a young lady who was just very encouraging, and she loved celebrating birthdays. And she was like, throw him a birthday party. And so she was really also the catalyst for like, throw him a birthday party, special. I help you plan it, get the theme and so on and so forth. Because I'm not gonna lie, like when we were married, his mother, like, she did all the planning. Like, that's just kind of like, that's not my thing. I'm like a big picture, like the detail stuff. That's just not my thing. And so she was like really encouraging, really helpful with that. And so thank you, for the helping with that. And so I think. I would say, the parents just like really like give your children a quality of life. Celebrate them. They deserve it. They deserve to be celebrated. They deserve, to every year. Look, I counted all joy. Having lost 2 children, prior to Maxwell, I counted joy every year that I have with Maxwell, and I pray that the Lord extends his days phenomenally. But every year is special, right? Really, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, whatever term we want to use, every day is a blessing for all of us. But especially, I understand that our babies who are differently able, right? They have certain conditions and certain things that might make their lives a little more challenging, and so definitely. Celebrating Maxwell and celebrating your children, I think, is something we all should do because we never know, how long we have our children with us. I'm a part of a group on Facebook for special needs parents, and over 40,000 people in this group. And I've read posts where people have posted they lost their children, lost their teens, and it's sad. And so, I want to make sure that I celebrate Maxwell's life because he is a blessing. He's a blessing to me. And I dare say, without a shadow of a doubt, like, my best blessings professionally and just, the things that God has provided for me in my life has been because of Maxwell, has been connected to Maxwell. And I dare say the same thing, Maxwell's best blessings has been because he's been, I'm his father. And so, celebrate your children. They deserve it. They deserve to be celebrated. And for me, I think it's also important to see other people, see us celebrating our children. I know or heard of families who live with shame because their children, quote unquote, aren't normal, and they try to hide them, from social media, don't want to take them out, or are embarrassed of them. And so, I think as much as I can, I try to normalize, Maxwell. That's why, I post him so much, because I love him. I love him, and life sometimes it gets messy, but it's the beautiful mess that God has blessed me with, and the joy that God has blessed me with. And so I count it all joy.
That's so beautiful and freeing for anybody who feels like they do have to hide their children. I know the world can be mean places, and sometimes we try to
Absolutely.
protect our children. But that's beautiful to try to be part of the narrative that shifts the culture and how we see children and people that are differently able, and that they're worth celebrating and noting their difference and allowing them to experience a great quality of life. So I
Yeah.
want to end with this question. We've talked about your caretaking journey to this point in life, talked about your friendships. Do you have any books, podcasts, videos? You talked about the Facebook group that you would recommend to people who are caregivers for children with special needs.
And this is probably this is bad. At this point, I don't. Again, I'm a part of a special needs group, and I don't know the name of the group right now offhand on Facebook. But I'm a part of that community. I don't have any books. The books that I did purchase were more so surrounded around like disability awareness and and theology and religion. But who wants to read that kind of stuff, right? The average parent. Um, and so right now, unfortunately, I don't have any literature as it stands at the moment. There are a few pages out there. There's one. Uh, there's one page. It's kind of popular on Instagram. King's Fight. It's a family. Their child is named King. He has CP. Beautiful family, and they really just kind of showcase how they love their child and just just the family. I mean, just a beautiful family, and the mother who I think manages the page, shows just the highs and lows of parenting their child King. And so that's on Instagram. Some other Instagram pages I follow, but none that I know off the top of my head. I would recommend our story, Maxwell and Dad. That you continue to follow on our page to hear updates, to be educated and informed about all things Maxwell. But not only, again, it's not going to just be Maxwell stories. It's sharing other stories as well. And perhaps, again, I'm a pastor, so I am a person of faith. Perhaps connecting with a local church that might have some kind of support group or some kind of resources for families. I know typically that more so resides in larger churches. A lot of smaller churches, I just don't have the resources, perhaps, or the population might not be as the church might not be that big, and so smaller churches typically might have maybe one or two families, whereas larger churches might have more resources, more families, somebody who may have started this kind of ministry. But I think about St. John. One thing we do, we haven't done it yet this year, but I'm planning it for the summer. We do a disability awareness service or differently able awareness service. And I remember last year it's even caring for Maxwell, I learned so much in that service. We had people, we did call like a differently able march or disability march, and we had people coming down. Like for instance, I'm wearing green for CP, and March is CP Awareness Month, and so we had persons come down to the mic and shout out the color they were wearing, whatever color that represented their disability. And so, like, I think about one family, one of my members, their son and grandson has narcolepsy, I believe, and the color is black. And I didn't know that. I was like, and I saw them that this like, why are y'all wearing black? I'm like, oh, this is the color for narcolepsy. I was like, oh, okay, got it. And so I was able, to just be educated and informed about things, I didn't know, and I'm still learning along this journey. And so that's something I need to do a better job of, just reading different things and educating myself on different resources. And that's one thing I'm committed to, especially as I start this journey with this, creating this content, because I want this not to only be informative and educational, but again, a place where person can come and get resources. And so yeah.
Okay, that was all my questions. I'm kicking it back to you.
Well, again, no, thank you. Maxwell's turning up in there. Thank you for the opportunity, to share on this episode 2. Thank you for interviewing me. Thank you to all of our viewers who tuned in to our story, Maxwell and Dad. If you haven't done so yet, I invite you to follow us on Instagram, Maxwell and Dad. Like us, our page on Facebook, Maxwell and Dad, and share this content. Share it with somebody who that might be parenting a child who's differently able, or somebody who's just in the throes of parenthood, fatherhood in general. I invite you to share this, to follow us, to like us, and as always, to pray for us. And so again, thank you for tuning in for episode 2. God bless you. We look forward to seeing your comments. We look forward to seeing your feedback. We look forward to bringing you more content and great stories in the future.